Tom do this, and Tom do that.
I can't wait to get off work. That's Tom Waits here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Developing a green economy has been one of President Obama's central promises while on the campaign trail and since taking office. Well, my next guest believes that tightening environmental and consumer safety regulations in the American chemical and manufacturing industry is not only necessary for the health of the environment, but is good for the economy. Do you know what's in the mascara you wear or the toys your kids play with? Does the American chemical industry block regulation of products that may be linked to cancer, infertility, neurological and hormonal disorders? Do these lax environmental standards mean U.S. companies are losing out on one of the world's most affluent markets, Europe? Europe's stringent regulations require companies seeking access to their lucrative markets to eliminate these toxic substances and manufacture safer and greener electronics, automobiles, toys, and cosmetics. Award-winning investigative journalist Mark Schapiro is the author of Exposed: The Toxic Chemistry of Everyday Products and What's at Stake for American Power. Just out in paperback, he writes, quote, "The European-led revolution in chemical regulation requires that thousands of chemicals finally be assessed for their potentially toxic effects on human beings and signals the end of the American industry's ability to withhold critical data from the public." Mark Schapiro is the editorial director of the Center for Investigative Reporting, joining us here in the Firehouse studio. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you. Good to be here.
Talk about makeup. When a woman puts on mascara or lipstick or powder, I mean, someone's tested it, haven't they?
Well, I'd like to think so, since I just had a little bit put on myself backstage there. Unfortunately, this is an illusion that a lot of Americans have, basically, that somebody out there in the government is assessing the safety of the ingredients that they in the cosmetics that they put on their body. And I think this strikes really at this kind of, there's a deep mythology I think people have here in this country that the government is looking out for the health and safety when it comes to chemicals. And what I talk about in the book is really how that is unfortunately not the case, and what the consequences are for our health, but also for our economic and political status in the world.
I want to get to the issue of the economy and the fact that you say that deregulation is actually bad for business. But let's talk about health for a minute. Talk about how the FDA got started and why cosmetics aren't being regulated by the FDA.
Yes, well, good question. So we're back in the 1930s, coming out of that whole, they're in the Depression era, this is the Roosevelt era, and the Food and Drug Administration was created at that time to monitor the types of food and the types of drugs that Americans were taking. Well, at that time, there was a proposal to include cosmetics under the purview of the Food and Drug Administration. That effort was derailed by the cosmetics industry, which was a little more nascent than it is now, but succeeded in essentially exempting the cosmetics industry from regulation by the FDA. The only thing the FDA really looks at now is hair dyes. But anything else, whether it's your nail polish, eyeshadow, actually shampoo, essentially personal care products, is not regulated by the FDA. The FDA doesn't even have the power to regulate it. And numerous times in the Senate over the last 50 years, there have been efforts to actually expand the purview of the FDA, and it's been repeatedly beaten back by the cosmetics industry.
Lipstick, lead in lipstick. Is this an issue today?
This, it's actually fascinating. There's an environmental group, Healthcare Without Harm, which demanded from the FDA its data about lead in lipstick. And the response that it got repeatedly was, we're looking into it, we're looking into it, we're looking into it. It wouldn't, basically, in the end, wouldn't provide the data about lead in lipstick. So the answer as to whether it's still there is yes. And which is kind of extraordinary when you think of what lead does. I remember being a kid, you're not supposed to chew a lead pencil because it's like going to affect your brain.
Right, and here people who wear lipstick are licking it all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they're reapplying it, and then they're licking it again.
Yes, that is what people do with lipstick. And they put, I mean, the skin, one of the interesting things, medically speaking, is actually, it was fascinating for me to learn that the skin is actually an organ. The skin is an organ. It's a living organ. It's not just a covering of the human body. It's actually a living organ. So whatever you put on the skin ultimately makes its way into the body. And so when you look at cosmetics, and there are an array of ways we get exposed to toxic chemicals, but when you look at cosmetics, you have an array of substances that actually, some of which mimic estrogen, for example, the female sexual hormone, and which is, many scientists have a lot of concern about that idea. And so what we've discovered, and the reason I know some of this information, and the reason I can even tell you about it, and obviously the reason I wrote about it in the book, or where I got that information, is one, you have scientists who've been studying it in America, but two, you have this whole other body in the European Union, which has actually decided to ban a whole array of these substances, things that cause cancer, mutation of human genes, reproductive damage. So the reason I even know what kind of material is in cosmetics is not because the FDA has told us. It's actually because the European Union has taken the action to remove that stuff, and they have a list.
What is the stuff?
The stuff is an array of ingredients that are determined to cause cancer, that are determined to cause reproductive damage, and that are determined to cause mutation in human genes. They're called CMRs. So the European Union actually looked at cosmetics, to determine what kind of ingredients are being used, which of them are potential contributors to. It's important to remember that when I say caused, because people need to understand how chemicals work. It's complicated. It's not like you put lipstick on and you're going to get sick. That is not how it works. But we're talking about an accumulation over life, over the course of your life, over years and years, multiple times repeated, very, very minute amounts over the course of many years. And that's where the concern lies in many of these substances.
Talk about a product you don't hear very much about in this country. You're not going to see on the ingredient list on cosmetics or other things, and that is phthalates.
Oh boy, yeah. Phthalates. The more I found out about phthalates, the more I couldn't believe people. We were contending with these things on a regular basis.
Phthalate starts with a P.
Right. Phthalate starts with a P. It's a very unusual spelling, a lot of consonants. But phthalates are basically a plastic additive that makes plastic soft. That's what I have on the cover of the book, a little rubber ducky. The rubber duck is traditionally made soft with phthalates. Kids play with these things, as they do with many other toys. And what's interesting about that is that studies have been done for years now, 10, 15 years, suggesting that the phthalates, which soften plastic, contribute to the reduction of testosterone in young male infants and are very potent, endocrine disruptors in an early stage in life in particular. And these are used in a whole array of things, from children's toys. Kids suck on them. Kids play them. They're soft, so they play with them and squeeze them and throw them at their mothers and all that, and their fathers. And they're also in our shower curtains, dashboards, and automobiles. You have phthalates. So what I talk about here, and what's interesting, is starting about 10 years ago, the European Union began removing phthalates from children's toys. Why? Because children suck on these things. And when they suck on these things, their levels of phthalates are elevated, and there could be a potential contribution to disrupting a very vulnerable endocrine system. Back and forth, there's been massive lobbying by the American chemical industry to try to prevent the Europeans from moving forward. They did move forward, and we finally in America, 10 years later, have actually banned, about 6 months ago, the U.S. Congress finally banned phthalates in the United States in certain children's toys. Number one, 10 years after the European Union did, which means the European companies got a big advance on finding alternatives. And two, they're still selling out the inventory. So they're permitted to sell the inventory in America until it runs out.